Picture this. It's October 2001 in Houston, Texas. The temperature is dropping. The sky is overcast and drizzly. Inside a sleek glass skyscraper, 20,000 employees are staring at their computer screens in complete, deafening silence. Their life savings are evaporating in real time. $74 billion are vanishing into thin air. And the executives who promised them everything? They're upstairs, selling their stock at inflated prices, collecting hundreds of millions of dollars while encouraging everyone else to buy more. This is the story of the greatest corporate fraud in American history. A fraud so sophisticated, so audacious, that it fooled 98% of Wall Street's smartest analysts. The lessons we should have learned are being ignored right now, as similar schemes play out with crypto exchanges and tech companies across the globe. You think you know about Enron, you've heard it was about greedy executives and bad accounting. But here's what they don't teach you in school. Enron wasn't just a company that cooked its books. It was a machine designed from the ground up to manufacture the illusion of success. It pioneered financial instruments still used today. It manipulated energy markets and caused blackouts affecting millions of Californians. It destroyed one of the oldest accounting firms in the world, and it fundamentally changed every law governing how corporations report their finances. But before we dive into the deception, the betrayal, and the devastating human cost, we need to understand how this all began, because Enron didn't start as a criminal enterprise. It started as a dream, an ambitious vision of what American capitalism could become. And that's what makes this story so terrifying. The year is 1985. Ronald Reagan is in the White House pushing deregulation as the salvation of American industry. Oil prices have crashed. The traditional energy business is in chaos. And in Houston, Texas, two struggling natural gas companies decide to merge. Houston Natural Gas and Internorth come together to form a new company. They call it Enron. At the helm is a 53-year-old economist named Kenneth Lay. Born in poverty in rural Missouri, Lay grew up the son of a Baptist preacher who also sold stoves door to door. He worked his way through college, earned a PhD in economics, and climbed the corporate ladder with a single-minded determination that his colleagues found almost unsettling. Lay believed in something with religious fervor. He believed in deregulation. He believed that free markets, unshackled from government control, would unleash innovation and wealth like nothing else in human history, and he believed Enron would be the company to prove it. Imagine walking into Enron's early headquarters. The smell of fresh coffee wafts from executive lounges. Young traders in expensive suits spark orders into phones. The air conditioning hums against Houston's brutal summer heat, where temperatures routinely hit 95 degrees with 90% humidity. The energy is electric. The ambition is palpable. These people genuinely believe they're building the future. Rather than just owning pipelines and power plants, the company begins trading natural gas as a commodity. Think about that for a second. They're not just selling gas anymore. They're betting on its future price. They're creating a market where none existed before, and it works. The profits start rolling in. But here's the kicker. Lay knows that to take Enron to the next level, he needs someone smarter than himself. Someone who can see angles nobody else can see. Someone willing to break every rule of traditional business. In 1990, he finds that person. Jeffrey Skilling is everything Kenneth Lay is not. Where Lay is folksy and charming, Skilling is cold and intellectual. He's a Harvard MBA who graduated in the top 5% of his class. He's a former McKinsey consultant who specialized in restructuring failing companies. And he has an idea that will revolutionize how Enron does business. Actually, revolutionize is too mild a word. His idea will make traditional accounting completely irrelevant. Skilling proposes something called mark-to-market accounting for Enron's energy contracts. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds technical and boring. Stay with me. This is where everything goes wrong. In traditional accounting, you record revenue when you actually receive money. You sell gas to a customer, they pay you, you record the profit. Simple, honest, boring. Mark-to-market works completely differently. Under this system, You estimate the total future value of a long-term contract and book that entire profit right now, immediately, before you've delivered anything, before you've received a single dollar. Picture this scenario. Enron signs a 20-year deal to supply natural gas to a power plant. Instead of booking profits year by year as they deliver the gas and collect payments, they calculate how much profit they expect to make over the entire 20 years. Then they record all of that profit in the current quarter. On paper, Enron just made billions of dollars. In reality, they haven't made anything yet. They've just predicted they will. If you think that sounds like a recipe for disaster, you're absolutely right. The Securities and Exchange Commission approves Enron's use of mark-to-market accounting in 1992. Looking back, this decision ranks among the most catastrophic regulatory failures in American financial history. It gave Enron a license to print imaginary money. Now, Skilling isn't stupid. He knows the company needs to actually perform eventually. He knows these projections have to be at least somewhat realistic. But here's where human psychology enters the picture. Once you start showing massive profits, Wall Street expects you to keep showing massive profits, quarter after quarter, year after year. The pressure becomes relentless. And when reality doesn't match your projections, you have two choices. Admit you were wrong and watch your stock price collapse, or find creative ways to hide the truth. Enron chooses option 2. By 1996, Jeffrey Skilling has risen to become Enron's president and chief operating officer. The company's stock is climbing steadily. Analysts are falling in love. Fortune magazine names Enron America's most innovative company. They will keep that title for 6 consecutive years. 6 years of innovation, 6 years of fraud. But to understand how they pulled it off, we need to meet the real architect of the deception. His name is Andrew Fastow, and he's about to become the most creative criminal in corporate history. Fastow joins Enron in 1990, the same year as Skilling. He's got a Wharton MBA and a gift for financial engineering that borders on genius. By the mid-1990s, he's become Enron's chief financial officer, which means he controls how the company reports its finances to the public. Fastow faces a problem. Enron is taking on massive amounts of debt to fund its ambitious expansion. Traditional companies would show this debt on their balance sheets, which would scare investors and hurt the stock price. Fastow needs the debt to exist without appearing to exist. He needs financial magic. He creates what are called special purpose entities, or SPEs. Think of them as shadow companies. On paper, these entities are separate from Enron. They have their own names: Chuco, LJM, the Raptors. They sound like villains from a science fiction movie, and in a way they are. Here's how the scheme works. Imagine Enron has a failing investment that's worth $50 million less than what they paid for it. In honest accounting, you'd have to report a $50 million loss. Instead, Fastow creates a special purpose entity. Enron sells the failing investment to this SPE, booking the sale as revenue. The loss disappears. The books look clean. But here's the part that makes it fraud. These SPEs aren't really independent. They're controlled by Enron. They're funded by Enron. They only exist to take bad investments off Enron's books. Some of them are actually managed by Fastow himself, who pockets millions in management fees while officially serving as Enron's CFO. He's literally paying himself to help the company commit fraud. Now, you might be wondering, where are the auditors in all of this? Isn't their job to catch exactly this kind of deception? Enter Arthur Andersen, one of the most prestigious accounting firms in the world. They've been in business since 1913. They audit some of the biggest companies on the planet, and they're completely in Enron's pocket. Arthur Andersen earns $25 million a year from Enron in auditing fees. But that's just the beginning. They also earn $27 million a year in consulting fees. That's $52 million annually, making Enron one of their most valuable clients. Do you really think they're going to risk losing that money by asking tough questions? The lead auditor is a man named David Duncan. He works out of Andersen's Houston office. He sees the special purpose entities. He sees the aggressive accounting. He sees the conflicts of interest. and he signs off on everything. Year after year, Enron's financial statements receive a clean bill of health. But here's what they don't teach you about corporate fraud. It's never just about money, it's about culture. And Enron's culture is absolutely poisonous. Skilling implements something called rank and yank. Every 6 months, employees are ranked against each other. The bottom 15% are fired. Imagine working in that environment. Imagine the fear. Imagine the pressure to produce results at any cost. The trading floors become war zones. Young, aggressive traders compete ruthlessly for bonuses. The winners are celebrated, the losers disappear. Nobody questions the ethics because nobody wants to be next. Picture the scene. It's 1998. The Houston summer is oppressive. You can feel the humidity the moment you step outside. Inside Enron's gleaming headquarters, the air conditioning is blasting, but the stress makes everyone sweat anyway. Traders are screaming into phones. The smell of catered Tex-Mex mingles with coffee and nervous energy. On the trading floor screens, numbers flash green. The stock is rising. Everyone is getting rich. But here's the truth that nobody wants to acknowledge. A significant portion of those profits aren't real. They're projections, estimates, hopes and dreams dressed up as financial statements. If you've made it this far, you're about to learn the part of the story that rarely gets told. Because Enron's fraud didn't just affect shareholders and employees. It affected millions of ordinary Americans who never bought a single share of Enron stock. The year is 2000. California is in the grip of an energy crisis. Rolling blackouts are sweeping across the state. Hospitals are losing power. Traffic lights are going dark. Businesses are shutting down. The official explanation is that California's deregulated energy market has failed. There simply isn't enough power to meet demand. But the real reason is far more disturbing. Enron's traders are manipulating the market. They've developed schemes with names that sound like military operations. Death Star, Get Shorty, Ricochet. These aren't video games. They're strategies designed to artificially restrict energy supply and drive up prices. Here's how Death Star works. Enron schedules more power to be transmitted across certain lines than those lines can actually handle. This creates artificial congestion. California pays Enron millions of dollars to relieve this congestion, even though Enron created it in the first place. They're being paid to solve a problem they manufactured. The recordings that emerge later are devastating. In one, an Enron trader laughs about a California wildfire that knocked out power lines. "Burn, baby, burn," he says. In another, traders joke about hosing California consumers. These are real people talking about real suffering, treating it like a game. The California energy crisis causes an estimated $40 billion in economic damage. The state's governor, Gray Davis, is eventually recalled from office partly because of voter anger over the crisis. People's lives are upended. Businesses close, and Enron's traders are high-fiving each other over their bonuses. Think about that for a second. This isn't victimless financial crime. Real people sat in the dark, real businesses failed, real families struggled. And it was all engineered by traders in a Houston skyscraper who saw California's pain as profit. But even as Enron is manipulating California, the cracks in the empire are beginning to show. The year is 2001, February. A young Fortune magazine reporter named Bethany McLean is doing something that almost no one on Wall Street bothers to do. She's actually reading Enron's financial statements, and she's confused. McLean publishes an article titled, "Is Enron Overpriced?" The piece asks a simple question that no one can seem to answer. How exactly does Enron make its money? On paper, Enron is reporting over $100 billion in annual revenue. Its stock has climbed from around $20 to over $90 per share. Analysts are calling it one of the greatest companies in America. But McLean notices something strange. Despite all these reported profits, Enron's cash flow statements tell a different story. The company is burning through cash. It's taking on more and more debt. The numbers don't add up. Skilling is furious about the article. He calls McLean and tries to explain away her concerns. His explanations are circular and evasive. She's not convinced. Neither are some investors who finally start asking questions. But here's what most people don't realize. By the time McLean's article is published, at least one person inside Enron already knows the truth. Her name is Sherron Watkins, and she's about to become the most famous whistleblower in corporate history. Watkins is a vice president in Enron's finance department. She's been with the company since 1993. She's smart, experienced, and she's noticed things that terrify her. She understands the special purpose entities. She knows they're hiding billions in losses. She knows the whole house of cards is about to collapse. In August 2001, Watkins does something that takes extraordinary courage. She writes a memo to Kenneth Lay. The memo is blunt. It predicts exactly what's about to happen. Her exact words: "I am incredibly nervous that we will implode in a wave of accounting scandals." She writes that Enron's accounting is an elaborate hoax. She warns that the company could be devastated when the truth emerges. She's putting her career, her reputation, and possibly her safety on the line. And here's the devastating part. Kenneth Lay reads the memo. He takes it seriously enough to have Enron's lawyers investigate. But those lawyers are the same firm that helped structure the deals Watkins is warning about. Of course, they find nothing wrong. Lay could have stopped it all. He could have come clean. He could have restructured the debt, fired the bad actors, and saved the company. Instead, he chooses to believe what he wants to believe. The fraud continues. If you think that's shocking, wait until you hear what happens next. August 2001, Jeffrey Skilling suddenly resigns as CEO after just 6 months in the top job. He claims personal reasons. The stock drops on the news, but analysts remain optimistic. Kenneth Lay reassures everyone. He tells employees the company is in great shape. He encourages them to buy more stock for their retirement accounts. Let me repeat that. Kenneth Lay is telling employees to invest their retirement savings in Enron stock, while he and other executives are selling tens of millions of dollars worth of their own shares. Lay personally sells over $90 million in stock in the months before the collapse. The word for this is betrayal. Pure, calculated betrayal of people who trusted him with their futures. October 2001. The world is still reeling from the September 11 terrorist attacks just weeks earlier. Markets are volatile. Investors are nervous. And Enron is about to make everything worse. On October 16, the company announces a $1.2 billion write-it-down. Translation: they're admitting that a massive chunk of their reported profits never actually existed. The stock starts falling. But the real bombshell comes next. The Securities and Exchange Commission opens an investigation. More write-downs are announced. The special purpose entities are finally exposed. Wall Street finally understands what Bethany McLean had been hinting at all along. Enron's stock, which once traded at over $90, crashes. $40, $30, $20, $10. By November, it's trading below $1. $74 billion in shareholder value has evaporated. Now, you might be thinking, at least the executives faced consequences. And yes, eventually they did. But first, consider the human cost that they never had to personally experience. 20,000 employees lost their jobs. Many of them lost everything. Their 401k retirement accounts were heavily invested in Enron stock, and the company had locked down those accounts during the crucial weeks when the stock was collapsing. Employees literally watched their life savings disappear on their computer screens and couldn't do anything to stop it. $2 billion in employee pensions vanished. Picture this. You're 55 years old. You've worked at Enron for 20 years. You did everything right. You saved diligently. You invested in your company because you believed in it. You were planning to retire in 10 years with a comfortable nest egg. And then, in the span of 6 weeks, it's all gone. Your entire financial future erased. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because executives you trusted decided to commit fraud on a scale that seemed impossible. The stress and despair led to real human tragedies. While there are no officially documented deaths directly caused by the scandal, Countless employees experienced health crises, family breakdowns, and profound psychological trauma. The ripple effects touched tens of thousands of families. December 2, 2001. Enron files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. At the time, it's the largest bankruptcy in American history, $63.4 billion in assets. But the liabilities, the debts hidden in those shadow companies, are overwhelming. The dominoes keep falling. Arthur Andersen, the auditor that blessed all those fraudulent statements, begins shredding documents. Literally. Partners order employees to destroy anything related to Enron. In one famous eyewitness account, an employee testified, "We were told to destroy everything related to Enron. This is obstruction of justice." It's a federal crime, and it will destroy an institution that survived for nearly 90 years. In March 2002, the Justice Department indicts Arthur Andersen. The firm is eventually convicted. 85,000 employees lose their jobs. One of the Big Five accounting firms simply ceases to exist. The conviction is later overturned by the Supreme Court on a technicality, but it doesn't matter. The firm's reputation is destroyed. Its clients have fled. Arthur Andersen is dead. But the trials are just beginning. Andrew Fastow, the mastermind of the special purpose entities, pleads guilty in 2004. He admits to siphoning over $45 million for personal gain while hiding billions in corporate debt. He cooperates with prosecutors, testifying against his former colleagues. His sentence, 6 years in federal prison. Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling go to trial together in 2006. The courtroom in Houston is packed. The media coverage is intense. Former employees, many of them broke and bitter, wait for justice. His exact words, "I think the evidence overwhelmingly supports the conclusion that I was not aware of any improper transactions." Nobody believes him. Both men are convicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and other charges. Skilling is sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. It's one of the longest sentences ever handed down for white-collar crime. Lay is also convicted, but he never serves a day in prison. On July 5, 2006, while vacationing in Aspen, Colorado, Kenneth Lay dies of a heart attack. He's 64 years old. Some people believe the stress of conviction killed him. Others aren't so sympathetic. Under a quirk of federal law, because Lay dies before his appeal is heard, his conviction is vacated. Legally, it's as if he was never found guilty. This means his estate retains assets that might otherwise have been forfeited. His victims are outraged. Some see it as one final escape from consequences. Now, you might be wondering, did anything actually change? Did all this suffering lead to reforms that prevent this from happening again? The answer is complicated. In July 2002, Congress passes the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It's the most significant reform of corporate governance since the 1930s. CEOs and CFOs must now personally certify their financial statements. False certifications can result in personal criminal liability. Auditing firms face new independence requirements. Public companies must establish audit committees. Internal controls must be documented and tested. The law increases compliance costs by 20 to 30% for public companies. Some argue it's too burdensome. Others say it doesn't go far enough. And here's where we need to talk about what we haven't learned. The 2008 financial crisis happens just 7 years after Enron. Once again, complex financial instruments hide massive risks. Once again, rating agencies and auditors fail to sound the alarm. Once again, ordinary people lose their homes and savings while executives walk away with millions. Fast forward to 2020. Wirecard, a German payments company, collapses in a fraud scandal eerily similar to Enron. Billions of dollars in reported cash simply don't exist. The auditors, Ernst & Young, are accused of failing to verify basic information. Sound familiar? And then there's FTX in 2022. Sam Bankman-Fried builds a crypto empire valued at $32 billion. Customer funds are secretly transferred to his trading firm. Billions disappear. The parallels to Enron are striking. A charismatic founder, Complex financial structures designed to obscure reality, a failure of oversight, a sudden collapse that destroys people's savings. Theranos is another example. Elizabeth Holmes convinced investors that her blood testing technology worked when it didn't. She raised nearly $1 billion on lies. Like Enron, the company was valued on promises rather than reality. Like Enron, the fraud eventually collapsed under the weight of its own impossibility. The common thread in all these scandals is something uncomfortable to acknowledge. We want to believe. We want to believe that the next revolutionary company is real. We want to believe that we can get rich quick. We want to believe that sophisticated people in expensive suits wouldn't lie to us. But here's the truth. The incentives haven't fundamentally changed. Executives are still rewarded for short-term stock performance. Auditors still depend on fees from the companies they audit. Analysts still face pressure to issue positive ratings. And investors still chase returns without asking hard questions. If you've made it this far, let me take you back to Houston one more time. It's November 2001. The weather has turned cool, around 60 degrees, which passes for winter in Houston. The drizzle has stopped, but the sky remains grey. Inside the Enron building, employees are cleaning out their desks. Security guards watch as people carry boxes of personal belongings past the sleek reception area where they once felt like masters of the universe. One of those employees is a young accountant. She's been with the company for 5 years. She met her husband at Enron. They bought a house together, started a family, built a life. Their retirement savings were in company stock because that's what everyone did. That's what the executives encouraged. Now she's wondering how she'll pay her mortgage. She's wondering if she'll ever trust a corporation again. She's wondering how the people who did this can live with themselves. 20 years later, some former Enron employees gather at reunion events in Houston. They share stories over barbecue, the smell of smoked brisket mixing with nostalgia and bitterness. One former employee keeps Enron memorabilia in his home, feeling what he describes as nostalgic yet betrayed. The experience shaped an entire generation of Houston workers. A married couple who met at Enron 23 years ago now uses their story to illustrate something surprising. The scandal, despite destroying their savings, actually strengthened their marriage. They had to rebuild everything together. They learned what really mattered. They found meaning in survival. That's the complex human reality behind the numbers. Not just villains and victims, but ordinary people trying to make sense of extraordinary betrayal. Let's talk about the conspiracy theories and alternative interpretations that still circulate. Some defenders of Enron argue that the company was the victim of short sellers and regulators who were out to destroy a successful American corporation. They point to the timing of the collapse, coming just after September 11 when markets were already volatile. They argue that in a different climate, Enron might have survived. This interpretation doesn't hold up to scrutiny. The fraud was real. The accounting was deceptive. The executives knew what they were doing. But the argument does raise an interesting question about how market perception can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. A more credible alternative interpretation focuses on systemic factors. Enron wasn't an isolated case of individual bad actors. It was the product of a system that encouraged exactly this behavior. Banks like JP Morgan helped structure the deals, earning enormous fees in the process. Did they know the deals were designed to hide debt? The evidence suggests they understood exactly what they were facilitating. This raises uncomfortable questions about Wall Street's role as a whole. How many other companies are doing similar things right now? How would we even know? Declassified FBI documents from the investigation reveal the scale of the probe. Over 1,000 wiretaps were conducted. The investigation took 5 years. New details emerged about how executives used special-purpose entities to park losses temporarily, moving them around like shells in a game. Now let me give you some what-if scenarios to consider. What if Sherron Watkins' warning had been taken seriously? Imagine Kenneth Lay reading that memo and actually acting on it. He could have fired Fastow. He could have restated the financials. He could have restructured the company's debt transparently. Enron might have survived as a smaller, honest company. Thousands of employees might still have their pensions. Arthur Andersen might still exist. But the broader implications are even more interesting. Without Enron's spectacular collapse, would Congress have passed Sarbanes-Oxley? Would the reforms that did occur have happened at all? In a perverse way, Enron's fraud might have prevented even worse scandals by forcing regulatory action. What if mark-to-market accounting had never been approved? The SEC's 1992 decision to allow Enron's accounting methods was catastrophic in hindsight. Without it, Enron would have had to report earnings the old-fashioned way, when cash actually came in. The incentive to create fake profits would have been dramatically reduced. What if deregulation hadn't happened at all? Kenneth Lay built Enron on the philosophy that free markets were always superior to regulated ones. But Enron's story demonstrates the limits of that philosophy. Without oversight, the freedom to innovate becomes the freedom to deceive. Let's talk about what Enron gave the world, because it's not all negative. Enron pioneered electronic energy trading through a platform called Enron Online, launched in 1999. At its peak, it handled over 6,000 transactions per day. After Enron's collapse, this technology didn't disappear. It evolved into platforms like the Intercontinental Exchange, which today is one of the largest commodity exchanges in the world. Every time you hear about oil prices or natural gas futures, you're seeing the legacy of Enron's innovation, even if the company that created it is gone. Enron also experimented with broadband trading, treating internet bandwidth like a commodity that could be bought and sold. While their specific ventures failed, the concept survived. Today's markets for data center capacity and fiber optic connectivity trace their conceptual origins to ideas Enron was exploring in the late 1990s. The irony is that Enron really was innovative. That wasn't a lie. The problem is that innovation without ethics becomes destruction. Let's address some common myths about the scandal. Myth: Enron collapsed solely because of executive greed. Reality: the fraud was systemic. Banks helped structure the deals. Auditors approved the books. Analysts issued buy ratings. Board members failed to ask basic questions. The culture of the 1990s, with its worship of shareholder value above all else, created the conditions for Enron to thrive. Individual greed was necessary, but not sufficient. Myth: all Enron employees knew about the fraud. Reality: most employees had no idea. They were regular people doing regular jobs. The fraud was concentrated among a small group of executives who deliberately concealed their actions. When the truth emerged, rank-and-file employees were just as shocked as the public. Myth: the executives got away with it. Reality: Andrew Fastow served 6 years in federal prison. Jeffrey Skilling served 12 years, one of the longest sentences ever for white-collar crime. His sentence was originally 24 years before being reduced. These men lost their reputations, their freedom, and any claim to the legacy they once imagined. Kenneth Lay died under the weight of his conviction. These were real consequences, even if they don't feel proportionate to the harm caused. Myth: Sarbanes. Reality: the law helped, but it didn't prevent the 2008 financial crisis, the Wirecard scandal, the FTX collapse, or countless smaller frauds that occur every year. Regulation is necessary but not sufficient. Culture matters. Incentives matter. And right now, both still encourage short-term thinking over long-term integrity. The documentary Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, based on Bethany McLean's book, captures much of this story vividly. But even it has limitations. The film emphasizes Skilling's arrogance and some salacious details about executive behavior, while underplaying the complicity of banks and the broader systemic failures. Real life is more complicated than any 2-hour movie can capture. Academic debates continue about Enron's legacy. Some scholars argue that the company was a victim of groupthink, where a culture of conformity prevented anyone from speaking up. Others see it as a case of rational opportunism, where individuals made calculated decisions to enrich themselves within a flawed system. The truth probably involves elements of both. What does this all mean for you watching this video right now? Think about your own financial life. Do you know how your retirement savings are invested? Do you understand the companies whose stock you own? Do you ask questions, or do you trust that someone else is watching? Think about the companies you admire, the tech giants, the innovative startups, the charismatic founders promising to change the world. Are their financial statements real? Are their profits sustainable? Or are they using accounting tricks to maintain an illusion? Think about the systems you rely on, the auditors who are supposed to catch fraud, the analysts who recommend stocks, the regulators who enforce the rules. Or are their incentives aligned with the people they're supposed to be watching? Enron wasn't ancient history, it happened in our lifetimes. Many of the people involved are still alive. The systems that enabled it still exist. The human tendencies that drove it, greed, ambition, the desire to believe in success stories, are timeless. Jeffrey Skilling was released from federal prison in 2019 after serving 12 years. In interviews since then, he's expressed regret while still disputing some aspects of his conviction. He was reportedly working on a startup when he was released, because America is a country of second chances, even for convicted fraudsters. The former Enron headquarters at 4400 Post Oak Place in Houston still stands. ExxonMobil now occupies the building. If you visit the Galleria area and look up at that gleaming glass tower, you're seeing a monument to ambition, innovation, and the thin line between breakthrough and breakdown. Artifacts from the Enron era survive in museums. Employee ID badges, stock certificates now worthless but valuable as historical objects, fragments of shredded Arthur Andersen documents, preserved as symbols of cover-up. These physical remnants remind us that this really happened to real people. The California power plants that Enron manipulated are still operational. If you take an energy history tour of the state, you'll see facilities where Death Star and Get Shorty were executed. The lights are still on. The scars remain. So what's the ultimate lesson? Trust, but verify. Always verify. In an era of complex financial instruments, artificial intelligence, and global markets moving at the speed of light, the Enron scandal teaches us that complexity itself can be a weapon. The more complicated something is, the easier it becomes to hide deception. Pay attention when something seems too good to be true. Enron reported 24 consecutive quarters of profit growth. Analysts loved it, investors loved it. But a young journalist asking a simple question, how does this company actually make money, helped bring down the entire edifice. Protect yourself. Diversify your investments. Don't put all your retirement savings in a single company, no matter how much you believe in it. The Enron employees who lost everything made a mistake that was completely understandable. They trusted their employer. That trust was betrayed. Don't let the same thing happen to you. Demand accountability. The reforms that followed Enron happened because people demanded them. Public outrage forced Congress to act. That same energy is needed today when we see similar patterns emerging in crypto markets, in tech valuations, in companies that promise transformation without delivering results. Remember the human cost. Behind every corporate scandal are real people whose lives are destroyed. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but families, hopes, dreams, and futures erased by someone else's greed. That reality should inform how we evaluate corporate behavior and demand ethical leadership. The Enron story ends with bankruptcy, trials, and reforms. But in another sense, it never ends. Every time a company inflates its numbers, every time an auditor looks the other way, every time an investor ignores warning signs because they want to believe, the ghost of Enron stirs. We are all responsible for staying vigilant, for asking hard questions, for demanding honesty from the institutions we depend on. Because if we don't, the next Enron is always just around the corner. Think about that the next time you read about a revolutionary company with astronomical valuations and profits that seem almost magical. Think about Houston in 2001, when the smartest guys in the room turned out to be the biggest fraudsters in history. And ask yourself, do I really understand what I'm investing in? Do I know how they make their money? Would I notice if the numbers weren't real? The answers to those questions might protect your future. They certainly would have protected 20,000 Enron employees who never saw the collapse coming until it was too late. This is the story of how Enron faked profit for 6 years and fooled 98% of Wall Street. It's a story of ambition and betrayal, innovation and deception, reform and continued vulnerability. And if you found this valuable, if you want to understand more stories like this, the hidden truths behind the headlines, the human dramas behind historical events, then subscribe to this channel. We go deep on history's most compelling moments, the ones that shaped the world you live in today. Leave a comment below telling me this. What modern company do you think might be the next Enron? What warning signs do you see? I want to know what you're watching, because sometimes the crowd spots trouble before the experts do. And if you want to know about another scandal that changed everything, click the video appearing on your screen right now. It's equally shocking, equally important, and equally relevant to understanding the world we live in today. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop asking questions.